Hi everybody, welcome back to Two Pugs Cast. As always, I'm Ray Roche, one half of Two Pugs, and this is Jim.
Jim Lavery, the other pug out of two pugs. But there's more than two pugs this week.
Yeah,
Ray, we have an honorary pug, do we?
we are honoured to have Derek Keogh. Derek is the coolest man I've ever met. He never gets ruffled.
Hey,
He has ice in his veins.
You need to get out more. You really need to get
Probably
out more.
do, yeah. So now Derek,
You
in the
do.
hell, give us some background on who you are.
I'm Derek. I am basically the biggest comic book nerd you will meet. I know God knows too much stuff, but I'm also a writer, bit of an artist, and colorist in training. I'm one of those guys who wants to make comic books, and I love the medium and just basically comic book conventions. I love going around Artist Alley and meeting Ray and Jim and everyone else who goes there. And I try and support them as best I can, and I try and learn to try and make my own comics.
Well, welcome aboard this week. Now, what we usually do
Thank you
is
very much for having me.
about our own comics we produced, and last week we actually branched out into our top 5 things we hate in comics, right? And some of them, there's a bit of an overlap, things we agreed we didn't like, you know.
Yeah.
My worst was floaty caped Superman. I can't stand this Superman floating over the world, you know, looking down on everything. I just don't like it. It just doesn't do it for me. It does do it for the story for me, but that's the level we're at. You know, you can say what you like. There's no discrimination.
All right, but I think that I can understand that hatred, because you don't understand why is it floating like that. Like you're trying to think, oh, it's wind, but then there's this great image. I think if anyone ever looks it up, it's from JLA JSA Vice and Virtue, which is a great scene, which is Superman is in space looking down at Earth, and there's ice forming on him on his cape, and I think he's there with later scene with Alan Scott, and they're both there, ice looking down. It's about perspective. Yeah. That's sort of like, to me, you make the cape functional and practical, but if the cape floating for no reason, like, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
In comic books.
Like, he's in space, why is it floating? You know, but that's beside the point.
He wouldn't float in space. Yeah. But ice forming on it does make a bit more sense.
It does, yeah.
With the logic of it.
So tell us, you've always been a comic book reader, obviously, right?
Yeah, I'm
your first comic.
Pretty much been.
Where did you start off?
I think first comics will always be the Beano and the Dandy annuals you get at Christmas. They are a tradition. I still get them, even though I'm in they censored my age, because I'm well into a certain age, and yeah, I still love the Beano and Dandy. I think they're great little comic strips. They bring back great memories. But then it was like Spider-Man cartoons and X-Men and Batman. All of them really got me into it. And I just kept following it since like the '94 cartoons, and I picked up various comics over the years. And I think the first ones I actually went out and bought were it was the Panini series they had out, which was Spider-Man. I think the first issue I bought had Spider-Girl, like what if May Parker lived, and another was Avengers versus the Squadron Supreme, which was the '98 annual, which was reprinted in the UK editions, which were great. Which was like, oh wow, who are these characters? I know Cap, I know Iron Man, but who are these guys? Who's this guy? Who's Justice and Hawkeye and who's May Parker? And I was like, trying to figure it out, because I didn't know it was What If for a couple of years, and then discovered it was. And it basically, I just kept collecting comic books over the years, which is basically my main big hobby. And I'm just a nerd who just loves the stories, and the artwork has always just intrigued me in more ways than one.
Yeah, we say every week how telling a story through comic form, how the rules are there, and how easy it is to do certain things and difficult to do other things. But it's about telling the story, and kids love the simplistic stories. You know, they don't worry about character development. You know, they want a bit of action, they want color, they want likable characters, and a bad guy they can sort of trust to be a bad guy. Whereas nowadays, grown up comics, everything is kind of ambiguous. Our latest one is a cowboy western. Well, it's a vampire western, and a big thing in it is ambiguity. No one is black, no one's totally black, totally white. A lot of grey area in there, and I think you find that in nowadays comics, like up to date modern comics, a lot of grey areas, and the characters are allowed, even the good guys, to do certain bad things, and even the bad guys are allowed to be, a little good, if you know what I mean. Do you find that?
I find that a lot, and I think it's just it makes you have to root for the hero, you have to root for the villain, you also have to understand that like each character can bring something differently. I'm thinking of examples here, like we see with Batman, we see what Batman's willing to do to save the city, but also then you can see like in the Flash, you can see with the rogues, like these are like Captain Cold is a criminal, but he is a criminal with a code, and you can sort of relate to that when you look at the Jeff Johns run, which was great, when he did his rogue profile of Captain Cold, which is great. Is sort of one of those defining moments that you understand a villain, in my mind. Next would be Deadshot from Suicide Squad, because he is a cold-blooded killer, but he has a code. You can't just have a straight over-the-top villain nowadays who can just, he's like, I will destroy you, and then a hero who's good at anything, because I think we're all that cynical now that we're like, oh, nobody's perfect. No one is that ideal perfect hero or perfect villain, stuff like that, because there's shades of gray. And I'd be out in the pub with my mates, and we talk about like Fantastic Four. It was actually this weekend. I was talking with a mate of mine, and we were talking about the Fantastic Four. If we were given the trilogy, if we were given a storyline to do a Fantastic Four film, and trust me, after a few drinks, it's interesting what we came up with. But our first story arc, and we immediately went, our first thing was Doctor Doom was not going to be our main, would be the overall villain, but we'd reference him in the first movie or first story, and then work on other villains and try and make them more relatable. And we had some great ideas. We went from like Red Ghost, Small Man, Annihilist. We went through them, and we broke down each villain, and we said, what would make these villains more interesting, or what's the twist that we could do with them and make them more unique in a way of. And we're seeing that nowadays in movies and things where they're not just I'm gonna like Killmonger. We understand Killmonger's understanding of Black Panther. We understand a various degree of Loki isn't the overall villain, but you understand his motives. There's so many villains. Like I'm trying to run through my head. Each one is there's a tweak in there, and sort of Peacemaker. There is someone I've heard about the show. I feel like I should watch it. I haven't watched it fully. But I can understand where he's sort of the weird quirkiness of the idea. I will kill for peace.
I'll kill
sort of that weird irony of it,
just to get peace. I get it. I know what you're saying. And I didn't like him in the movie, but when they took that character and we saw where he came from, we saw his father, and beautifully played by Terminator 2. He's just incredible.
He's a great actor. I would love to meet him. Actually, he's one of those actors I would love to meet, especially because I love seeing other stuff. Like everyone be like, I love TNT thing. I'll be like, I liked him in the TV show they did, was The Unit, where he was like the commander of this like special forces team, which was great.
But he's unrepentantly and unashamedly misogynist and racist. He's like he's a character like Iron Man, but he's like the White Dragon, which is very Ku Klux Klan kind of thing.
Yeah. I remember seeing that.
He's just
in Suicide Squad comics.
And, I wish I'd written it but
James Gunn is one of those great writers. I think he is someone who finds very quirkiness to the characters and make them original.
Yeah.
Like if anyone was watching this, I'd say go out and watch the film Slither. That is like that is pure horror comedy. That's what you want, and you got a cast in it. You got the Michael Rooker, Nathan Fillion, I was watching some clips of it recently, and I'm spacing on some of the names. Yeah, the lassie from The Office was in it, I think. The other people as well. But it's one of those films I would recommend. But he is someone who finds the horror element, but he also finds the humor of it, and he works quite well with it. And that's what you need with storytelling. Like he took Guardians of the Galaxy, which are characters I knew little about,
Yeah.
and he made them very unique. He took each one of them and made like.
I do have an issue with the way they have Drax in the movies. He's not my Drax from Annihilation, you know. It's played
Yes.
it's just, it doesn't sit well with me. I love Dave Bautista, but I don't like that character. The way they have him there, it doesn't work for me. But Guardians of the Galaxy, the whole bit of Rocket Raccoon and this escaping from the prison, and I need his leg, you know, just so funny, you know. And as you say, he finds the humor in things. But yeah, thumbs up for Guardians, you know. And Slither was one of our top 10 horror movie favorites for years here in the house.
Yeah.
But again, difficult picture to describe, you know. Michael Rooker, he just chews the scenery, you know. He's just amazing. So,
He was great. He came to Dublin Comic Con.
Yeah, I saw clips of him. I've only started going to cons a couple of years ago, and I saw clips of him working the audience with a microphone, like an old pro.
I asked him a question.
Oh, what did you ask him?
I asked him, I asked him what it'd be like to work with Kevin Smith on Mallrats 2, and he just said, "Yeah, I'll do it again." But I mean, I don't think you're sort of stuck with what questions you can actually ask him at times, because everyone was like Walking Dead questions.
Yes, yeah.
And I had that. You have, when I go to cons and I'm in a panel situation, I have a default question. And then I have a slight backup question. So, which is great to have, but I think that was one question that just popped in my head, because I think everyone has done Walking Dead questions or a few other here and there bits, and I was like, Mallrats was the first place I really saw him in, and I didn't want to ask him if he wanted the chocolate covered pretzel. I just did.
So moving on, what would you say is the worst comic that you've ever read? And you can be quite free in what you say, because it's only an opinion, you know.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what is the worst. I think there isn't really a worst comic I've had. I think it's just at the time I wasn't a fan of it, and then later on I appreciate it, or I loved it initially and come back to it. I'm actually gonna have to just. I'm looking to decide where some of my shelf is to see if I've got a series where I can sort of throw my head around.
Can I ask you? Would you say you described yourself as a writer and artist? Which is there one higher than the other? And then, so just to follow on to Ray's question, then what leads you to a book? Do you follow writers or do you follow artists?
I follow both. If you have to look at is a great writer is like let's see, Tom King is a great writer, and he's got a great selection of like artists who've worked with him, especially when you look at Strange Adventures, or Strange Adventures probably is great work because he has that well written out, and the artwork just complements. Like, I'm spacing on the artist's name, but I go in because of who the characters are, and then I watch and I see who the artist is and the writers. Like, I don't like, if I have to pick up because a certain writer picks it up, I feel like I'm a bit cheated at times, because I feel like I have I expect something when I go in, but then others, I feel like I can, like, I've picked up the recent Spider-Man issue, which is with John Romita Jr. back, and he's a brilliant artist, but I feel like as I say this, there's going to be like someone's like hunting me down for saying it, but he's a bit repetitive with his styles. I know he's a brilliant artist. I know he delivers this great thing, but his characters look so the same after a while, that you think to yourself, can they push this further? Can he push it like a bit more? And now I feel like I'm going to be hunted down and feel upset about Romita Jr.
It's very easy to get carried away by art, You can see something that looks fabulous, and you buy it, you get it home, and a guy came up to us at Dublin Comic Con, and he'd bought a comic, and he was buying stuff off our table, and I said, "What's that like?" And he said, "Not a lot happens in it." He'd literally flicked through it and read it while he was waiting for the kids at the Lego stand. We pack a lot into ours. It's difficult to compare one comic with another, because this other comic was obviously a showpiece. It looked the business. It was full color. It was very American looking, but it's only part one of something else. Whereas ours is like a complete graphic novel, a full story. There you go. So we have different pacing. It's a completely different animal to what he had, but I could see what he was saying. It's difficult to pack everything into a story. You've got character, you've got art, you've got development, you've got a million different things. Sometimes you hit the ground running with things, but if you've got an established character like Batman or the Flash, you bring a lot with it. It brings an encyclopedia with it, but also brings baggage. People go, "I don't like that bad guy. I don't like this storyline. I didn't like crossovers, blah blah blah." So everything we do is give and take. And the luxury we have is we're independent, so we can make any story we want and tell it anywhere we want. And then it's up to the reader to see, do we do a good job? If you're pleasing DC or someone else, or someone above you have to get it past, you've really got to abide by certain rules, and so you cannot take as many risks. There is repetition. You've killed off a bad guy, you bring another bad guy in, but you don't want to be, let's say you're an artist, but you've never done a lot of writing. You will see simplified characters coming back. Like if I try to draw something, you see simplified drawings, and I'm not an all-rounder. I can do certain things, but him is he's my guy. He takes what I write and he makes it real, and he develops it. Like on City of Clowns, there it's Ray Roche and Jim Lavery. It's a partnership.
They're always partnerships. It's always when you're trying to work with a creative team.
If you're
trying to find the balance.
There's some things are very little in the way of partnership. That's how I want it. And that's different style than we have. We have a different way of doing things. But I was listening to I think it was Robert Kirkman, Walking Dead. He said that when he started off, he was a complete numbnuts. It was his way or the highway. And he started off, he was working part-time in a shop, he was making fanzines, and he developed stories, and he had all these wonderful ideas at the start. But looking back now, he says he wouldn't have done those, but he had to get them out of his system. But
I understand it.
Yeah.
I understand that because I had this Daredevil storyline in my head, and I spent basically about 2 days writing out roughly what I want to happen in the first 3 issues. What I want to happen, I wrote it out roughly. And Paul Cower, from Limit Break, he basically, I tweeted and he goes, "Remember to scratch off the serial number if I was going to publish it," or something like that, because change it up, that it's not a Daredevil story, it's my own creation. But I wrote it in my head because I wanted to see where I could go with the story. And just because I had Daredevil in my mind and the Daredevil universe, I could use it as a good template. And now that I think it was last week or something like that, I sort of had 5 minutes and I just sort of redid it in my head, but I try to change enough in my head of the story that says this is no longer Daredevil, this is someone else's story, this is originality, which is what you want to do. But it's also, you have to say, this will work well in Daredevil, but it won't work if it's creator on things, since people don't have the backstory of a character.
Yeah, this is the thing. Hit the ground running with something. It's not easy to do, but it's achievable. But a lot of story gets sacrificed. A lot of pages get sacrificed at the start. And you're trying to sell something in a shop or on a table. people want to just be pizzazzed straight away, And what kills me is they go to, like the Japanese, they go to the back of the book and see the last page. Why people do that, I don't know.
Uh, I think it's a lot of ways. Like if you look at like a mainstream comic, it is sort of like, what's the big reveal, and then once you open up the comic, you're like, big reveal is, let's say, Tombstone's at the big reveal. Spider-Man, Daredevil villains reveal at the end. You're like, okay, and I have to read the 24 pages to find out why did Tombstone show up, or like alien symbiote or something like that. You want to see where the story goes, but that's why people sometimes, because I think we're a generation not being patient to sit, like, just read it straight from part one. You want to, because you want to spend your £4 or your £5, and you want to make sure you're picking up a good quality comic, and you want to have an ending that you are going to look forward to. In a way, it's not a bad thing, but it's I think just the way things are nowadays.
We've in our first few podcasts, we sort of described our journey into comics, and a couple of touchstones that you hit there as well. A common, just the Beano the Dandy. One other thing was the availability of it, that there was a corner shop or a news agent or something that they were just on the shelf and everything. And was it like that for you? Was it, because there were no comic book shops whenever I was a kid? It was until I was 16 or 17 that I found out there was a comic book shop, but it was exclusively newsagent. How did you come about them?
Local newsagent was where the local newsagent was usually. It's gone now. Was basically where I went in and I bought my comics. I bought the Beano and Dandy for years, and then when I moved to buying the Panini reprints of the Marvel series, I went in there and I developed a standing order with them, and then when they went, I had to try and find another standing order. And then when you become a teenager and you can go into town, you discover Forbidden Planet or Third Place, which Third Place then became Big Bang and Sub-City and all that. You learn, and you find out that the one comics that you got on Eason's, there are more of them. There's the stories have expanded. I think that the kids nowadays have it easier. They just have to pick up the phone and they can just find the copy of something, where I was like, oh, I had to look in every bargain basement I could find to get that issue. Or I discovered this on my own. I wasn't recommended by someone on Instagram or TikTok or something like that. I had to hear it from secondhand friends, like Watchmen. My friend, who I drink with, we are comic book nerds, and he recommended Watchmen to me for years. And I was like, no, I won't pick it up. And then I picked it up in the shop, and he was like, I knew you'd like it. I knew it. And we've now tried to convince another friend of ours to pick up comic books as well. But he's someone who sort of he read Watchmen, I think, during lockdown, and we were like, so what did you think? And he's like, man, Zack Snyder's just a hack. And we're going, we've been telling you this for years, because like you saw how like everyone hails him as a great director, but he had to work with Dave Gibbons to basically make Watchmen, and it was like nearly a plot point from that storyboard, the storyboards of the comic book. And then, like, you see walking, I feel like I've gone on a big tangent there, but again, we are introduced various ways. It's like someone introducing you to a new soundtrack, or you should listen to this album or something like that. It's always going to be recommendations from someone else. Like, people will recommend Sandman and other comic books, and you just pick up, you get a free one off a friend, and then you read it, and then you're like, I want to see what else it can go.
In that store, there's a lot of books that are classics in there, like Sandman passed me by because I was the wrong age when I came to them, and I don't understand them. And I really say I don't get it. But I could see how much people love these things, and I appreciate it, And wherever we find comics, and there's people of a certain age all read Dandy, Beano, Victor, etc., etc. Nowadays, kids are popping out of the womb with Comic House and Comixology, and they have 50,000 copies or whatever, and it's click, 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 click. And I don't know whether they have the same appreciation or not now. Some do, obviously, but some, I have to say,
there will be a new generation of them. There will be a new generation of them.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's they're exposed to a lot more stuff, and they can go into different fandoms very quickly. Like you have it with manga. Like I didn't discover manga until I was in my late teens or something like that. And even then, I couldn't pick up. I picked up probably some Naruto, a couple of books of Naruto, and I picked up one or two of My Hero Academia. But again, the problem with manga is that they go out of print so quickly from book one to where they are now. That's the problem. But when you look at a Marvel or DC or any US comic, they will reprint the popular books. They will reprint them after a time period. And there are books that still go out of print, but digitally you'll probably find them. But the market is just different from what was there and what is now. And like I'm very interested to see what happens in the future.
Well, there was something worrying happened, a small convention there in Dublin last week, Decaf. This little girl came up and wanted to buy, she wanted to buy a comic off me, and I said, these are really like grown up stuff, monsters and things, vampires, and she produced Attack on Titan manga, and she had a page bookmark, and she opened up to show me, and it was a guy being like ripped apart, and I went, well, if your mammy wants to buy it for you, that's okay. And mammy came over, and mammy said, what's the problem? And I said, well, she wants to buy this, but there's vampires in it, and it's scary, and monsters and blood in it. And she says, well, she reads that, why not? So what do you do? I couldn't sell it to her, I sell it to mammy. It's up to mammy to decide, But
that's the best way to do it. That's the best way to do it. I remember it was Eason's had problems because they had the Panini reprints of Batman, and I think they reprinted one of the runs, and it was remember Dark Knight Returns? Remember Joker's henchman Bruno? The woman with the swastika on her things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't draw that, Jim. Don't draw that, Jim. We don't want to get that fan base. But no. But again, it was
Nazis, you say? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, the mother came into Easton. I remember reading this story, and I think a few people passed it on to me, and I was just like going, yeah, that's one of those stories where you feel like an editor should realize we're reprinting these. These aren't really going for adults. There will be kids who be like, oh, Batman, cool. Mammy, what's this on her? And yeah, that's it. But again, some parents don't care. They like go, oh, it's comic books. There's nothing horrible inside them. Open them up, and you see Sentry ripping apart Ares in Siege, and you're like, oh, for all ages.
Yeah,
But it's a question of when you're going to expose kids to this and when you shouldn't expose them to it. But at the end of the day, nowadays,
it's something Jim said.
They can find it easy enough.
Violence was okay in some comics, but sex is a no-no. How about that?
Yeah, there's hardly any. There's very little sex in the way of sex. Very little. Not that I've ever seen. I've seen again those Japanese artists, like they're full on some of it. I've seen some kind of craziness in Japanese comics, but generally Western comics, you can be so all the violence in the world. I've seen not a lot of blood, really, not a huge amount, but you've got to go up a step to the Dark Knights. We talked. The Killing Joke has come up a couple of times in conversation. It's very rare. All these, I mean, they're the most beautiful people in the world. We talked about superhero comics, these spandex and just unbelievable physiques, these ladies blessed with legs and boobs and guys with muscles everywhere and everything. Very little sex. Nobody's really kisses here and there and that kind of thing. It's not usual.
Yeah, sex is one thing. Representation of it, sexuality is a different thing. and it always will be, always should be, I suppose. We put very little sex in our books, because we sell to kids, if possible, But
again, you don't have to go to the ways that basically the boys do in terms of comic books, because that's the style that they want to go with which is the antidote. Like, you can be suggestive. You can sort of make sort of like the old days where you can make sort of old pre-VC shows where they were like making suggestive lines, like Mrs. Slocum from "Are You Being Served?"
Oh
Where
yes.
you could say those lines, where
What
where she
pussy?
can say that line. There you go, or Mr. Humphreys or something
Yes.
like that. It is, you can go that, you don't have to show it. You can have a line that just goes over someone's head, and 20 or 30 years ago down the road when you grow up a bit, you can understand the joke a bit better and stuff like that.
Well, there's something I wanted to, if I could ever have spoken to Stan Lee and ask him a question, the question I would have asked him for, because he has all this history and back, and he worked with all these artists, and I can't even, my brain can't process Jack Kirby's drawing method, his illustration method. I heard it described to me one time where he would just start with no preparation. He would start at the top left-hand corner and just go down to the bottom, and that was it. Then he was on to the next page. He didn't. Maybe he revised a little bit, wrote it out, and all of this. I just can't get my head around how you do that. But anyway, so he worked with all these artists and so on and so on. But I never ever heard him speak really affectionately about comic art. Like, comic art was his favorite form of art, or he really loved comic art. Because I always heard him say things like he was just doing a job and he fell into this kind of career. Really, it was just a job to him, and maybe he thought he would write something at some stage. So I never ever heard him saying this is. But what I pick up from you, Derek, and from Ray, and other people who are into comics, is this love. They really absorb themselves into the medium. This is, for me anyway, as well, their favorite medium, their favorite way to absorb stories and all of this, and then they fall in love with art and a writer and so on. So anyway, that's what I would have Stan Lee if I ever got a chance to, because I never heard him speaking affectionately about the art.
I met Stan Lee at London Comic Con. I met him at London Comic Con. The picture's actually there behind me.
Oh, is that all
it
right?
was sort of, it's in the far, just right behind my head there, which is pretty cool. I didn't really get to ask him a question or anything like that, but he was just signing away and like awestruck to actually meet him. But again, like him and Kirby, they were guys who took what was basically the generic medium of like cowboy romance comics and stuff like that, and they found something different. They brought something different. It's like the people who back in the old 30s and 40s used to just make the same like westerns and detective noir things, and then all of a sudden someone comes out and makes something completely different, makes the anti-hero, makes no one relate the character different. You look at Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca would probably be a cool example of just a change from your standard hero arc. He's sort of like the anti-hero. At the start you think he's a scoundrel, and then as it goes on you see how the character has changed. And like that's what Stan and Jack did. They brought something different to what was the standard medium of the time, which had been dominated by Superman and Batman, where you had Superman being this like punches villains out of punch the villain, save the day, stop a bus full of nuns full of dynamite, which I find to be the funniest thing I ever. The concept of like random comic book sort of tropes, but it's still funny in my mind because that was like generic, like, oh no, we must stop this bus full of insert danger, insert who should be saved, and stuff like that. But he turned around, he took storytelling, and he did like what was different, especially with J. Jonah Jameson, which is someone who we saw in the 24 pages how Spider-Man dealt with his problems. He's running late for a job interview. He's running behind rent. He's stopping Scorpion from throwing a bus off the thing. And then you have that one page at the end where you have J. Jonah screaming, "Spider-Man menace." It was Spider-Man Scorpion who threw it off the roof. But then you have someone like Jack Kirby who takes the artwork and the skill and just make it compelling, make you understand what the story is, or the threat, or the taking away the glasses adds to the danger of what it is.
What's your so you're a writer artist, so you've two things going on, I think. So I could this is hard to explain. I could read a badly written story if the art is really good. But if the art's really poor and the story's terrific, I find it more difficult to read. Like I can't get beyond the art. The art, because the art's more immediate than the story. I think that's like what's your where do you fall down, or what are you looking for in a good comic or story?
A good story is between the two. It's always going to be, the artwork is going to just immediately draw your eye to it. It will help grab your attention more in what's the story, and then the story will always be the one that fills in the blanks. It is, but I've seen artwork and I've just been like, oh, this is terrible. This is like, I'm not a fan of a certain style. I think I'm trying to think of the name of the artist who did a couple of X-Men. And anytime I see his artwork, I'm also, oh, this is gonna be, I'm not a fan of his artwork, but then I read the story and I'm like, the story's pretty good, but I think it's going. Like it's very much like it's very rare that I'm actually like go, I'm not going to read anymore. I'm done. The story's not what I want. This artwork's not what I want. Like I can't think of any off the top of my head. Like I think the only one I can think of would be when it popped in my head would have to be when J.J. Abrams' son wrote Spider-Man. I think that's the only time I've really like, after like maybe at first issue, I just said no, I'm not going to pick up another issue for some reason. I don't know whether it was just the story or the artwork or because of coming into COVID, but it was just like, if it's one of those stories that it just didn't grab me. And it's also somewhere because I see the cover around every so often, and I might go, so it doesn't grab me, and I don't think the story had what I wanted and the history of it, but I probably will one of these days might sit down and read it and might enjoy it, but it just didn't grab me at the time, and I just put that issue back in the bottom of my read pile for a very long time.
I remember watching Rob Liefeld, and when he came and all of and there's kind of a wave of there's something going on, because on the one hand people were trashing this guy and the artwork, and it's terrible, and we all know the Captain America drawing that is held up as an example of Rob's
perspective
work. But at the same time he's selling millions and millions of copies, and so when I was drawing along and trying to figure out, I want to know what is this guy, because he's got something, he's selling these millions of copies, so I'm going to learn. I'm going to see, well, what is it? Let's go and find out what it is, and
I don't know what it is. He just has his style is just there, sort of like the over the top. I remember he's did 2 issues of a Teen Titan run, and I have the images in my head, and he does do this sort of like over the top masculine stuff, like it's almost like if you to take the spectrum of comic book styles, like you have Jim Lee style, and his is sort of going to this far extreme of what Jim Lee style is. That's what it is. If you're a fan of Jim Lee, you'll lean into his stuff because you're like, oh, I like Jim Lee's style. Maybe this could be interesting. And then you go in and you see the extremes. You see, but as I said, like with about John Romita Jr., he can be someone who can nearly bring the same characters back. He nearly brings them in the same poses or same looks of like his villains or his tiny feet or something like that. I don't know where it's just because of restrictions of like time to get stuff done, but he's someone who is he just brings something that just basically he's on the far spectrum of what people like, and people go there because they just want to see the variation of the style of what it is. Well, I mean, he's a Rob Liefeld book. I think the last one I picked up was probably Snake Eyes. Oh no, that's Larry Hama actually. I forget last time I picked up like last one I can think of off the top of my head was actually Teen Titans, and that was back when Jeff Johns was on the run. But again, it's sometimes the artwork you see, but the story just escapes you completely. Because sometimes the artwork can overpower the story, or vice versa.
That's the ironic thing is I can't remember a single thing about the story. I just don't. It was Youngblood, and I was reading it, and it's been so long. Maybe that's the thing. It's just thing, but I just wanted to learn as much as possible and go, well, who's the most these are the most popular guys in the world at the moment. I want to learn. I want to see, well, what is it that they're doing? Let me learn what they're doing. Like I've no snobbery about good artwork and bad artwork. There's some artists that just leave me cold, and I think, all right, okay, I move on. But I just try to learn something. Which genre, or do you like all genres, or which do you like most, or do you prefer?
I prefer superhero genre. But horror I'm not a heavy fan of. I feel like a lot of times when I see people and they pitch like independently, they pitch horror comics on Kickstarter. I'm not an uber horror fan in comic books. I'll pick up maybe one or two, but it's not somewhere where I gravitate towards. Like I'm more like classic superheroes and a few art books every so often, but basically I'm pretty much in that superhero vein of storytelling. Like it would be Marvel, DC, IDW, the odd Dark Horse comic would be my sort of wheelhouse where I'd go. Like deep horror stuff, it's hit and miss for me. Like Marvel Zombies, everyone's like, "Oh, this is brilliant." I was like, going, "Yeah, I'm all right. So I can leave this for a bit." Like I've read it, and but at the end of the day, it's not horror's not going to be like the one I run to, like pick up. Like, oh, I need to pick up this new horror comic. I'm happy enough with like a superhero comic, so like just to escapism like that, where you go, it's not going to be too heavy and not too light, but it'd be a nice balance where I can go like I can escape the world for 20 minutes reading the comic.
Yeah, that's interesting because Ray, I don't think we haven't done a superhero comic, not straight up.
We don't do superhero comics here. No,
we don't do some superhero comics here. No. We've almost every other genre.
The main reason is I don't understand them. I can't. I've tried and I've tried to write a superhero story, and it just turns out as a parody. And I do take
every superhero story. Every superhero is a parody. Every superhero is a parody. You go from Invincible, The Boys, down to Billy Batson as Shazam. They are always going to be parodies of it. You are taking what is
someone else is doing it, I won't do it. If someone is doing the type of version of the story, I won't do that story.
Yeah,
because they'll do it better than I can. But the whole Superman, I can just about take, but because I grew up with him, it's my DNA. Batman, I like, but I don't class them as superhero. Spider-Man and the rest of them, they're only good sometimes for me, Like I don't have any Spider-Man comics. I got into comics only a while ago. I mean, I'm not that huge collector, and there was 20, 30 years when I didn't read comics, and the famous story was someone canned me Wolverine, and I said, "What's the Wolverine?" And he went, "Oh, right, it's Wolverine. You know Wolverine." And I did not know who Wolverine was. He was a well-established character at the stage. I did not know who he was because I hadn't read comics since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
The superheroes,
That's
I just don't get it up here. I just can't fathom it. You know.
I think it's the psychology of it all, and everyone has like save the day superhero sort of mentality, and probably you have probably one of the unique perspectives when it actually comes to your writing is that you're not going to go superheroes, you're going to go somewhere different that other people aren't going to cover, and that's a good strength because like for me, I have like a mountain of like comic book knowledge in my head, and anytime I sit pen to paper and I'm writing, and I'm like going to myself because I write nearly for 7 people in my head. This might be because I might have multiple personality disorders, but that's for a trained psychologist to have. But no, you look, the way I write is probably different to you. The way you write, I write for myself first, and then I write for an editor in my head if I was editing this, and I'm running through all the encyclopedia of every comic I've read. Like, oh no, I've seen this before. You need to change this. You need to change that. And then I write for an artist. I write for the penciler, the inker, the colorist, the letterer, and then I'm reread for myself. But I'm working out what would every person have to say if they were looking at this in a clean, fresh mind, and they'd be like, no, you can't draw that here. That's too much. This page needs to be bigger, or you need to control how many words you have on this page, or you have to specify what colors you want because you're going to be specifying to an artist or a colorist, and then a letterer has to say, you need to learn to spell what is correct or how many words you have in the panel. But that's how I see it. But again, because I'm writing for superheroes, I understand it better. But if I was writing for horror, it'd be a very different mindset. But I still have to go into my mind and figure out every character's how to write it. But again, it's still superhero world will slip into it because I've seen it being done 100 times. That's always what it's going to be.
That's something, Ray, we talked about this a couple of times. Ray is usually talking about something else in his script. You know, the script we do, or we did a fantasy Dungeons and Dragons comic. Well, it's the story of a family, a really weird, dysfunctional family, really. So, to me, although you might do a superhero story. If it were you, Ray, you're talking about something else. Talking about, I don't know, politics or something. And then the SSDD, there's another kind of dysfunctional relationship going on. So there are these other things, City of Clowns. Yeah, I'll let you explain that, right? you can explain that. But quite often, like, yeah, you might be in the superhero wheelhouse, but you're talking about something else going on.
I use the message method writing a story. You start off with a message at the top of the page and ask yourself, what 2 words do you think of? Write that down, and then each of those words you write down 2 more words that they make you think of. So you fill a page at your words, and by the time you get to the bottom, you have all these things that don't seem to be connected, but really they are in your head because your brain is not like a computer. Your brain just borrows bits and pieces of memory and thought from different places, and puts it together. But I find that what I want to talk about isn't very obvious, and it's the last thing you want to say at a table selling at a convention. Like, this book is about whatever, because people don't want to hear that part. They want to hear it's a story. It's about vampires, or it's about clowns, or So if I was going to something,
you want to do the elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You want to have your elevator pitch, which is simple enough that you could say to someone and they will recall it in their head. They go like, so vampire clowns or something like that, or you just throw in the 2 words together and you find a pitch that works for everyone. You could just you could say it 100 times to someone and everyone can immediately get it. Like it's like throwing two films together and saying, yes, it's Godfather meets Alice in Wonderland, or which are two random words, but then everyone has their idea in their head that triggers something in their mind.
This is what we had to do. At the beginning, I was explaining the whole story to people at the table. Waste of time. Put people off.
Yeah.
Now, last weekend, I must have said Vampire Western 1,000 times. But it sold really well. People didn't want to know what it was about. Vampire Western, I'll have that. But the superhero thing is,
it's simple.
I find superheroes let me down. You know, I find them full of disappointment.
But that's actually probably a unique way of actually writing. If you actually did decide to write a superhero story, is basically writing about how this ideal of superheroes have let you down. And I think too, one of my first graphic novels I bought, and my mum actually helped me buy it because I went to Forbidden Planet with her when I was like very young, and I got a lend off a friend, Kingdom Come, and I loved it. I had to give it back to him. I was in town with my mom, and I said, "Can I go into this comic book shop, see if I can get this thing?" And I went up to the counter in Forbidden Planet, and I said, "Do you have Kingdom Come?" And it says, no, it's sold out." I was like, "Oh." And my mum, she was great. She actually basically went to one of the lads and she was, "Sorry, do you have this book in?" And he actually had a fresh delivery. He's like, "Yep, here you go. Here's Kingdom Come." But in that book, they have this great character. I don't know if you've read it.
Oh,
have
yeah.
you read it?
Yeah.
But you have the character of the priest, Norman. It's Norman, isn't it? I have to review that book.
McKay.
Norman McKay, I think that's it.
Yeah.
But he is someone who is basically, he lives in this world who has been, the idea of the superhero, of the Superman, has been completely destroyed. It's no longer this pinnacle thing. It's almost become like this dirty word. Oh, here comes these superheroes. They're wrecking the world and things like that. That's probably the unique way that I can see Ray writing it, because Ray could write it in a way of like someone being disappointed in superheroes, of this ideal of them. And we see that also in other stuff like The Boys. We see that with Billy Butcher and his complete hatred of them. And basically everyone in that has a reason to, that these heroes aren't these ideal saints. They're all sinners or not perfect. And even like the character of Starlight, who is someone who's a great way of looking at character, is someone who believes that these are great people, and then as she gets to become one of the seven, she realizes, no, wait, they're not. And that's someone like taking the genre and finding the right twist on it that no one has done before. And you'll see it, like every character, like politics is always going to play a part in any type of comic book. And I've said this to a few people over the years when Sue says, I don't like comics getting political. And then I have to say to them, they've always been political. The X-Men talked about racism.
Yep.
X-Men covered the AIDS epidemic and the legacy virus in a way of like that. You had civil rights. You had all variation of different themes over the years. And even early on, people said the first Captain America comic was him punching Hitler, which is basically one of those sort of things that it is telling a story to a young generation, but you're playing up the serious themes in more ways than you would like to admit. Same as the old Star Trek episodes, which talked about the first, like you had like race, religion, all the different styles of that, but they told it in a way that kids could watch and go over their heads. But then as they grow up, they go, now I understand what that meant. Now I understand what Kirk meant, or why the significance of this scene was with Hura and stuff like that. And there will always be stories like that. And even the superhero, like I know you're not the idea of not being a fan of superheroes, like the idea of them, but you could take a unique twist on the thing, because you could find the right message. And because you say they don't do anything for you, you can turn that into a story of saying, of someone who's not a fan of superheroes, and you find the right twist on it, and you can turn that into your own comic. even though it would be like it's a superhero book, but you can put your own little stamp on it from your own perspective.
You find that a story just takes over. It's all you can think about for 6 months. That's me. I spent last weekend. I spent all day Sunday, and I annoyed my family. Trying to come up. It's part of a story I'm doing. I'm trying to come up with an ad campaign for moisturizer, alien moisturizer. And I then had to explain to my wife.
Good night, everybody.
Why I wanted alien moisturizer. And she just looked at me and she goes, just don't know. But my family have been asked weird and wonderful questions over the years, But we're moving now into graphic novels rather than floppy issues, and it'll be a bigger gap between us bringing them out. But we have a couple coming up that might be fun to do, and it's outside my wheelhouse. One, Jim and I are going to work on a werewolves in Galway story. And that's a goer. That's definitely on the cards. But the second one,
go for it.
Yep, about alien moisturizer. And I have an artist in mind for that. She's fairly okay with the idea. There are things that I would never have thought I would write.
Yeah.
It's so I assume at some point I'm going to go right. I'm going to do a superhero story. I think it's in the future somewhere. But it's finding that hook that will keep me interested, because we only said the other night, we have to look at these characters for a year before the public sees them. And you can get so fed up looking at something, unless you love it. Really gonna love it.
You easily can with a character, or you could find one character you love writing in the book, and then you have the other characters like, I have to write these characters as well. I know where I want what this character to do, but this character is meant to be a minor character. I have to use the rest of the team of characters.
No, I don't get that. Every character goes in if I love them and I can write them. Jim actually brought a character to life that was supposed to be killed off. I had 3 other characters. I had to take them out to make room for this character. She's brilliant, she's a vampire. She was supposed to be killed off as like a cliffhanger shock kind of thing, Game of Thrones. But this guy, he draws her so well. She jumps off the page. And I got so much feedback from this thing. It's amazing. So now she became one of the 3 characters, rather than being a stunt character that was going to get killed off. Now she's a character, and I loved writing her after that. I don't mind throwing away characters.
That's great.
But no one goes in unless I love them. Even the small guys like the road guards and people like this. He's from the Wizard of Oz kind of thing. One of my favorite movies. There's a million little things in there, but I love all these characters. I even love the Nazi. I love everyone, every single one of them for different reasons. And you find ways of making them, not quite friendly to the reader, but the reader understands why he's there, why she's there, But I live with them for 6 months before I show Jim a script, And I always say to him, have a look first, see what you think. And I can imagine he just scratches his head.
That's what you need. You need the fresh perspective. You will always need the fresh perspective of what you write or what you draw, because, I could semi-half draw some of the comics I have in my head, but then if I give it to someone else, they could find something, they could find a twist, or they could find something that would make the character different. They could find something that makes you go completely rework the character, which is great. And sometimes feedback is what you need. And again, I think people probably who are watching this are like, oh, what has he actually done? And I've only written for the Phantom. I wrote the Phantom for the Comic-Con, which was the only time I was first. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna be plugging this until I die.
Yeah.
Order now.
Wow.
I wrote this. That's really my first ever published comic, and it was 4 pages in this, which is pretty cool.
But that is more than some people have done, and they've been saying for 5 years, I'm in comics, I'm making comics. They never get anywhere. you have to get the first page done. Get the first book out. Get the anthology. Get anywhere. You have to have something in print because it's an accomplishment. It moves you on to the next level. There's people out there who, I'm redoing page 6 again because blah blah blah. They are never going to get anywhere. They'll never complete anything.
Yeah.
You have to finish something. That's very important. Really,
I love writing. I love trying for the anthologies. I think the anthologies are always great because I tried out for the Limit Break one, which is their Kickstarter, which was the Greek gods, but they were doing all the mafia thing. And I was talking with Gary and Gary Maloney and Paul Carroll at Dublin Comic Con recently, and I just asked them where I was going right and where I was going wrong with my pitch, and the guys were happy with my pitch. But unfortunately, a lot of people did they picked that very similar character because everyone was picking Greek gods and stuff like that. And I think I could say it because it's, I picked Narcissus, the Greek god Narcissus, he falls in love with his reflection and stuff like that. And I wrote it like a film noir thing over a 4-page story. The guys were happy enough with it, but then they had to come back and say to me, we actually got about 5 or 10 other like Narcissus stories, because even though I picked a unique character I thought was unique, everyone finds their own little twist on a story of a character. But again, it gives me experience of sending in a pitch. People understand, like, they see my sample of my work, my story style, who I might work with, and then they come back and say, you need to fix this and this, but you had a strong enough pitch. And they might actually call me beforehand. They might say to you next time we have a pitch coming up, hey, hang on, Derek, we're going to do another one. We'll give you a bit of advance notice. Maybe you throw another 4 pages in advance. But getting the first comic is hard. Getting this next project is harder, because you're trying to find the next project that will let you do a 4-page before you self-publish, and you're trying to build up that rep.
That's the thing you've got to really love. This is the toughest business. I don't know if I'd make the same decisions knowing what I know now. And on one hand, it's even easier to get published in small press and online. Just put it up digitally on a blog or something, but it's such tough work all the time. And we were talking, Ray and I were talking about, you've got to do a bit of everything. You've got to maybe do a bit of color and a bit of lettering. You've got to be have a web presence. You've got to be at conventions. That's absolutely tough. It's the toughest thing. It's so difficult to make any headway in it. But what you're right is, you've got to write it, just write it, and then move on to the next thing. You can't procrastinate. You've got to get on and just.
You need that. And again, like I think there's a great thing that Rob Paulson said. He does the voice of Pinky, Yakko, all this. He talks about voice acting. And on his podcast, he said, no one put a gun to your head to do this, to be a voice actor. And that's sort of, again, with comic books, there is no one putting a gun to your head saying, you have to be the next Spider-Man writer or artist. You're writing because you want to do it. You want to create these characters or get this story escape your head, or let it like rattle around in your brain that only you understand it.
Yeah.
Well, if you really want your work to be out there, you'll get it out there. This whole thing of, I didn't get the breaks. The breaks only happen if you're constantly working hard. People say, "Oh, Spielberg come knocking someday." Spielberg is never going to come knocking on someone's house in Crumlin and say, "You've got a comic under your mattress you've never shown anyone. Can I make a movie out of it?" That's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen.
But you have your circle of friends and acquaintances, and they keep you in mind. You end up in something. Someone sees it. You push it. You keep going. We're doing hopefully we're doing an anthology this year, along with everything else we're doing, and it's alternate universes, because I have a thing for alternate universes, and it's what would crime be like in an alternate universe. At the moment, its working title is Crime and Punishment, but that could
Mm.
change. All my titles change. My wife actually does our titles. What we're looking for is people who we're not going to ask them to work for nothing, but
Oh, I was
exposure.
hoping you wouldn't do that.
Well,
I'll,
exposure
I'll
is
send
one
you
of
my
those
rates
things.
in a minute.
Well, exposure is one of those things that people say never
Yeah.
do it, but you'll find they all did it. They didn't call it exposure. They quote 3 days to do a cover, but really knew it was going to take a week. They threw those extra 4 days in, you know. So never be afraid of exposure, but don't get taken for a ride,
Oh,
you know.
oh no, you
Yeah.
can't. You can't be. But I mean, look, I've tried to get in projects, and again, sometimes they go to a certain point, and then unfortunately they crash and burn for one reason or another. And you're trying your best to get the next 4 pages. You're trying to get the next series or an anthology, and it can fall apart no matter what it is. I look for you got a unique idea of a pitch. Like it is sort of like the alternate realities of like crime and a great. I assume you watch the show Sliders. You're on TV
Yes, I
show
got back in there.
Sliders.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
I hadn't thought of it like that till I think it was you said it to me. I went, yeah, change one thing and see what effect it has on society, on the world. You know, I never actually taught a slider, but it's a perfect analogy. It is really. We do that with some of our stuff. You know, what if the police were clowns? But it's not just a joke. It's the entire society has changed. There are no police. You know, it's got to be all pervasive, whatever change you make. So if it's crime and punishment, especially, with a sort of a jokey sort of feel to it, black humor, I don't know, but yeah, crime. What would be a crime in alternative universe? You know, who knows?
well, that again, it depends, and also with a if I assume it's going to be 4 pages, everyone has to try and figure out, explain it in your first page, second, and then by your 4th page, you need to do the big twist. And your big twist is always going to be a hard thing to do because, like, especially nowadays, what would be a crime? Would smoking vegetables be a crime? Would basically walking outside naked be a bad thing or something like that? It depends on how your perspective of what is a crime, or crime nowadays, and you find the twist on it. I remember it was a BBC show, and they had like this series of things like, what if drugs were legal? What if reality TV took over what people watched? Or The Outer Limits, The Twilight Zone. They all brought something different. They all brought this unique idea of what is like different, what is a crime. And I mean, I swear to you, when you actually, if you open this up to people, you will not find any. You might find variants of teams, but you won't find like the same idea twice, unless someone mostly sends in the same idea twice under a pseudonym or something like that. But I mean, everyone has a unique idea, and I remembering John Rhys Davis actually when it came to Kerry. He did the Kerry con there.
Yeah.
And he talked about sliders. And actually, he's one of the nicest people to meet. Actually, he asked how you are, what you're doing, and stuff like that, which is great because I was a bit thrown by this. He's such a nice person. But he talked about sliders, and he said he just loved the early series sliders, where it was made you think. It was very original. And then when it came to the end of when he wanted to leave, the show became Monster of the Week, and he just said, "No, just write me out. I'm fed up with doing this." And I mean, that is it. Like, you will find that everyone has the limit of what can go. And like, even storytelling, like, will be very interesting from alternate reality storytelling. Like, even I have an old story in my head, which I haven't touched in years, but because you mentioned the crime thing, I thought to myself, like, 50s, a sort of variation of, like in 50s America, like, beatniks or stuff like that, or like, oh, can't do this or can't do that. Like, what would be a speakeasy in that type of reality be? Like, would the kids be like, oh man, we got to have some carrots, or beetroot or something like that? But that's you can change it up. You just take what is a simple premise. We would go to a speakeasy. What is the one thing they can do in a speakeasy that other people can't do? What's the cause? What's the effect? What's the bad idea of this turning out? And you see that in Man in the High Castle, type of things like that. That is probably another great example of a what if universe. What if the Nazis won? What would change? And they had this well thought out, and then they went, like they even had I remember, I haven't seen all of it, but I've seen a clip of it where they would find a woman who had known John Wayne, and she had his belt buckle, and he went off to fight the war, and he died, and stuff like that. And it's things like that, it's little twists like that they find. You could find in the reality of storytelling, of what ifs. And I hope you could find that in your anthology, that people will create something different.
Well, as I say, we're just talking about it now. Nothing's finalized. There are bigger and better anthologists out there, and have their own way of doing things. Not me. I finance everything myself, and that way I can say no to someone. And it's based on early experience I had in comics. I don't do bullies. I don't do egos. Come on board. We're a team. And that's it. There's nobody bigger than anybody else. I find that there's anthologists out there who are making anthologies, and it's a whole ego trip. How many Facebook people follow you? Are you well known? Because it's all about driving us. It's not about giving people an opportunity to be in an anthology. Now it's about driving us, get our name out there. And that's their thing, that's fine. Not me. So, as I say, I finance this myself. There won't be huge money involved on the front end, because I'll be paying everything.
Never is.
Pocket. So that might put people off, but Jim will tell you, I am a very fair person.
Back in. An anthology is basically where you can find, it's the first step for a lot of people. People, as long as you're not taking them for a ride, you're basically saying, yes, you're writing a script, yes, you're drawing this, but we're going to pay you X amount. If you agree it's that, and you're saying to people, I need this done in 2 weeks or a month, then you get paid. You set a very reasonable term, and you're actually giving people the work ethic. You ever heard of the Comedy Store in America? They had this series. Yeah, they did this series of 5 documentaries on it, and initially the place was like, if you're a comedian, you get your spot, you don't get a wage. But they actually had a strike in the 70s, but basically they agreed they would be paid a wage, and I think the club kept the money from the bar or something like that. Is some way they worked out the door or something like that. Anthology is like that in a way. It's taking that sort of agreeing, we're going to pay you X amount, but we get to keep this side of the profits, but you get paid the door, we keep money on the bar, basically, type of thing. And that probably be a great way to get people in, because you have to understand, everyone wants to have the next project. Everyone wants to go to another con where you have an editor, and you can just say, here's my portfolio of work, and you don't want to just show up like with just one 4-page story to an editor, and they go like, anything else? Because you want the next page. You want to show them you've worked on projects. You want to show them.
Actually, we were very productive over COVID. Simply because.
Oh, well, for some.
I learned how to ink and did some drawing.
That's right.
We actually brought out quite a few things over COVID. You see our table now, it's awash with stuff. I had to leave titles behind me last week when I was setting the table up, because I didn't want to have everything on the table, because some things aren't selling as well. But we were very productive over COVID. We didn't mean to be, But we have these stories that we want to tell, and Jim was very amenable, and we worked out a system, and I learned a ton, you know.
You
And
did. You need to give yourself inking credit on City of Clowns and Talking Gun. That's right, isn't it?
yeah, but I was
You
just
inked both.
I was just practicing though. I mean, I was just I'm no inker, like, you know, I'm passable.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Do you
but yeah,
think,
we were
like,
just
would
so
you
by the by, we were, it didn't mean to be productive, but we actually were. But I have to say, it all went on my credit card. I never did that again. We've had a couple of good conventions.
I think you reached out to me actually during COVID. You actually about coloring some of the pages, but then again, I was. But again, for me, coloring I did during COVID. I learned a bit more about coloring during COVID
Well, my
to
wife
where I am
actually,
now, and
my
especially.
wife does the books. She's a finance person because I'm useless with money. And she said, "Look, we can't do color. Full stop. It adds so much to the cost of an 84-page book. You know,
Yeah.
it doubles the cost basically, unfortunately. And it was gut wrenching because that weekend I got so excited. We're doing a color book. We're doing color. Come on!" And next thing I knew, she was saying, "Listen, boy, you know, rein your horns in. No, you can finish off that and that, but that's it." And she was right,
Yeah.
absolutely 100% right.
No one ever explains to you the financial part of making comic books, and I think that's something that you'd never see at a con. Is like bookkeeping for comic books, a panel on that or something like that. How to do spreadsheets, hosted by Paul Carroll from Limit Break. He would do it in the sort of. I torment him a bit on Twitter anytime he talks about spreadsheets, and I always put up like that Homer driving up in the car screaming nerd at him. But he knows me, so he understands that. He goes like, Derek's not doing this in any malice, but he would do it because he knew he'd get a laugh out of me. If you interview him and he says otherwise, I'll stop. But no, again, it's everyone has
You've got to
to,
know
but you
what
have to realize it is
on the
banks.
table. You've got to know how to get there and where to spend the money. And up to now, we have been black and white. It's an aesthetic, and it works well with Jim's talent, with his style. But we are going to go color. We have a werewolf book that's going to be in color. It's going to be dark though. It's going to be noir thing, but it's set in Galway, and that's going to be the first one we do in color.
And yes,
see
the
how
darkness of Galway.
this is it,
Yes, the darkness. Yeah.
At the moment, it's Galway Night. It's being called with K, right? But that'll change. All the titles change. Jim will tell you. He starts off writing one thing, and then next thing you know, oh, Jim, the title's actually this instead.
Do you remember we did that with Talking Gun? It was Cold River or something.
It was, yeah.
And Ray was going on, and I was talking about Cold River, and he was like, "So Talking Gun," and I thought, "Shit, am I doing 2 books?" And then you had to call me out. You had to go, "Listen, dickhead, for the last time, it's Talking Gun. I changed it a month ago. Can you stop?"
I think I do that with rough drafts. I do that with rough drafts as well. I've probably got a few comic books that I've like retitled when I'm like saving them because I think the title's a lot better. And then this is how probably I can't find some of my unwritten stuff because there's sort of
should
like
say something
variations.
You know, like that idea of a title should say something about the book. It shouldn't tell you the story, but it tell you the kind of world you're going to have when you open it. But I noticed there's catchy titles on books these days that if you just took that cover off, it means nothing. It doesn't change the book inside. It doesn't help at all. But it's literally just to catch their attention. You know, and the City of Clowns was originally Killer Clown Cops.
That's
and my
right.
daughter said that for months, and me and Jim would go backwards and forwards. Killer Clown Cops, Killer Clown Cops. My daughter said, "Dad, you can't call it that." She came on as an editor last year. She made a lot of changes, and I said, "Wait," and she goes, "It's KKK, Dad. What that stands for?"
Oh dear God!
Yeah, and I went, "Oh yeah." So my wife, we're throwing out all these ideas. And
I could just see this now. You're like Krusty running out onto his Carnival Classic things, and he goes KKK. Oh God! But you need the editor. You
don't realize, you know.
Yeah.
But,
That's why you always need an editor. You always need someone to proofread, read over it. My mom was my editor, my sister's my editor, my dad's my editor at times, because I let them have a proofread and they would sort of tell me where I'm spelling wrong, or they'd point out little plot points where I'm like going, can you just explain this to me a bit more detail? But you need the editor. You need someone with a fresh pair of eyes, someone who doesn't read comics as much, or understands, sees things differently. Because otherwise, like, this is how you could have actually been at the printing stage, and all of a sudden you could have paid to your editor, you could have paid the printer, and the printer comes back to you guys like, we're gonna have to change this book because someone pointed it out, or things like that. No. And it is, you always just need the fresh perspective. And like, I mean, City of Clowns is pretty cool, but I mean, another one, when I didn't think of the KKK part until I heard, I was initially like clowns, and for some reason I had alien clowns from outer space popped in my head, and until you mentioned that, I was like, oh boy, that's just it.
But people actually can get the wrong idea. Jim did a cover for Talking Gun. I love it.
Yeah.
The font he chose and the way he drew it, and it's like the three characters are kind of windswept. There's movement in it and everything, and people walked up at Dublin Comic Con saying, "Is that a sequel to The Walking Dead?" And I was going, "What?"
Just say, yeah, do you want to buy it? Yeah.
They're colorizing The Walking Dead now. And from a distance, someone thought that must be a sequel, a prequel to it. I was going, no, it's just different. What can I say?
Did you like have to like quickly remove it from the table as lawyers from basically AMC, and an image just show up like in helicopters, like just coming down with a cease and desist order? Like, was it?
Come at me, see what happens.
You see, that's what happens. It is something that you can't plan for. It's always going to be something like that, where someone will point out it's the emperor's new clothes. That's how it is. You have to look at it like that. There will be someone who will find that one thing that no one will say. They'll say it to you, and then you realize, oh my god, I did this wrong.
Oh yeah. No book is perfect. A book is finished, and then it gets to the reader, and then the reader, like we're always saying, gets a printed copy, goes home and goes, hang on a second, you said this on page 5, did I? I wrote that 2 years ago. We have the privilege, I suppose, because we produce everything ourselves. If there's a mistake, if there's a typo, if something's wrong, when I reprint them, I change the lettering. And if the pages that people are confused about, I would change the lettering to explain something. So the next print, like City of Clowns, is on its third go this time. And there's been a couple.
Is it really? I didn't know. Is it?
Yeah.
Oh well, okay.
It's doing like I thought it was a joke, and we do like 100 each time. So we got boxes of them waiting for a table at the Comic Con this year, but we're on a waiting list there, I'm afraid. So we'll see.
That's awesome.
But we all have to go to bed, so I'll wind it up. Derek, it has been terrific having you on. Definitely do.
I know you scraped the barrel. I thought it was like
no.
You said.
I said, who is the encyclopedia of comics? And I said, you. You're one of these people who are unfazable. If this was Texas Showdown in Las Vegas, 2 million in a kitty, Ben Turner, what you call it, throw it in the river. He's there, ice in his veins. Yep, I'll raise you. No expression. He's just deadpan. No, he's excellent.
Like playing poker, comic book poker, I'd probably more likely be shot for cheating or something like that. They would just be like, oh, no way he knows it. He's got marked cards or something like that. I don't. I just have this weird brain of encyclopedia knowledge of like comic books, actors, things like that. And I think even like that's just it. I love the medium, and I'm always trying to figure out, like, even when I'm writing, and I would find an actor in my head and I would put that into the artist. How about this actor?
Yeah.
Anakin.
That's what we discussed that last week. That's what we do. We pick an actor, like our police detective is based on Avery Brooks.
Good choice.
the girl is based on my boss, a real person. But every book is what I had in my mind when I wrote SSDD. You know,
Remember, you
Like-
have to mostly change it enough that you don't be sued. Just remember that are likenesses.
well,
That's why they have those cinema lines. This is not based on any person living or dead, just in case legally. Like that's just it. Your boss basically gets it, like her picks it off her niece or nephew, like, oh, what's this in? Wait a second, Roche.
yeah,
And things like
she's
that.
great though. You know, she's something else now. She's
Uh,
like I don't have to exaggerate things too much for the comic. Let's be honest. You know, she's
all right.
kick ass. Anyway, I've been Ray Roche from Two Pugs Publishing. You can find our books at the best comic book shops in town, Dublin City Comics and Big Bang. Twopugspublishing.org. Everything we have is there. You can contact Jim at Jim.
Jim Lavery 1 on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram, Jim Lavery, and Facebook on Jim Lavery. And I have a blog, jimlavery.blogspot.com. You can find me anywhere there.
We didn't get a chance to talk tonight about your colouring, but Derek has a portfolio page, and we'll put it up. We'll put a title page up with that on it, and
Yeah.
send hopefully some work your way. Listen, guys, it has
Hopefully.
been great. It has been an actual
Yeah.
joy, and I'm sorry about
No
the
worries. I was.
and this young lady, she's the
Oh,
two pugs. Yeah, and
she's the proper pug.
Yes, she's the best girl. Listen, guys, all the best. I'll talk to you again. Okay, God bless, man.
Thanks very much.
Talk
Thanks,
to you then.
Derek. See
Stay
you
safe,
later.
everyone.
See you next week.